Welcome to another session from the Microbiome Superhero. It is related for the cancer. Cancer is very like a scary word, and let's understand the what is behind the cancer. So we have Dr. Abhay Chopada and Dr. Rashmi Kulkarni who is going to talk about this. So Rashmi and Abhay, over to you.
Hello,
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
Hello,
So,
Abhay. Great to see you again on this episode where we are going to talk about cancer and the gut microbiome.
thank you so much, Rashmi. I'm so looking forward to this because it's a complete role reversal whereby I'm going to quiz you. And after having spent a few years in cancer research and actually being a practicing surgeon, I'm absolutely excited to know that we've now got a new way of thinking about cancer. I will start with a very simple story that happened about 30 years ago when I was working at Central Middlesex Hospital. Sorry, at the Middlesex Hospital. And while I was walking from University College to Middlesex with Chris Russell, who's a very eminent surgeon and my ex-boss, I asked him, what do you think is the reason we get pancreatic cancer? And the wise man, he turned around, and I still remember it very, very vividly, said, Chops, I can tell you one thing. We will look and we will look, and one fine day, someone is going to find us a bug, and they will tell us that this is the cause of cancer.
Wow.
30 years later, Rashmi, I'm so excited the more I'm learning about the human microbiome. To say, this is unbelievable. And I was telling Renu earlier that only 100 years ago, we used to treat tuberculosis as an end-of-life disease. We used to have sanatorium because if someone got TB, that was guaranteed death. Today, it's a curable disease. And that only happened with the same kind of thinking that we kept looking, we found the bug, we started treating it, and very successful. Now, after our discussion last week, that's the exact question I'm going to ask you. Tell me, how do you view cancer? What the heck is cancer to you?
So my view about cancer has changed over the past 3 decades because, that's a very, very interesting question. I was studying microbiology. I have done my bachelor's and master's in microbiology. So when we study microbiology, I remember the first day of college in bachelor's. I remember one of the professors asking us, what do you think about cancer? Is it genetic or what causes cancer? And I remember one student in our class actually said that pathogens can also cause cancer. And I was looking at him I was kind of ridiculing him in my mind, saying that, oh, what nonsense. Cancer is caused by genetic mutation. That was my thought on that first day of college. And obviously, he proved all of us wrong because when we learned more and more, it turned out that there are so many different pathogens that can cause cancer. One very good example is Helicobacter pylori. So that can cause gastric cancers. It is extremely well characterized, and I'm sure everybody knows about that. So, but when I think about cancer more and more, after that I learned genetics. So I learned the genetic causes of cancer. So I now first it was infectious agents. After that, we learned the genetics of cancer, and then after the Human Genome Project was completed, to the shock of all the scientists, we realized that it is not genetic mutations that cause 90% of cancers. Only 10% are caused by genetic mutations, and we actually need to do something to activate most of those mutations. They are not active. Of course, we are not talking about BRCA1, that's a very, very active mutation, and it poses a huge risk of cancers. But if we talk about all of the other mutations, they do not pose that much of a risk unless we activate them. And then when I actually started working on the gut microbiome, that was really eye-opening that, there are so many different factors to think that, you can have an infection in your gut that can be as simple as an E. coli infection. Now, E. coli, everybody who studies microbiology or anybody who is a doctor knows that E. coli is, we think of it as a harmless pathogen. It doesn't cause anything serious. But E. coli produces metabolites that increase our risk of cancers.
That's such a brilliant answer, Rashmi. And let me just put it as from my perspective, as a medical student. We were taught genetics almost like a clean area, and we were fascinated with the human codon. but we saw it in complete isolation. Now, the human being is made up of 32 chromosomes, 23 chromosomes plus X and Y. Every chromosome has a specific number of genes. Every gene has one of these four codons. And the way these codons play will decide how you're going to be. This is very similar to the way we look at any computer program working. At no point did we ask ourselves the question that are the answered satisfactorily as to who's controlling the program. How are these various genes deciding which gene is working and which gene is not going to work? Right? So I studied about gene silencers, gene amplification, but it never made sense. It never made sense because we just assumed that that happens, except why we couldn't answer. What fascinated me is the more I started hearing about microbiome, I started realizing that this is a way more complex thing. It's like millions of programmers were sitting and modifying your program. And based on what part is getting modified, what you see of that program is dependent on what input you're getting from them. Now, keeping that analogy in mind, I just want you to kind of tell me how are these microbiomes, or rather these gut pathogens, really affecting how genes behave? Because ultimately, genetic behavior is the one thing that is very common for cancers. What are they doing? How can I actually understand what is their bad behavior? You're on mute.
I will actually start with a very short story about that because, when I was studying lung cancer, that was about 10 years ago when I started working on lung cancer. I was working on breast cancer before. Very interestingly, this mouse model that I was using for lung cancer had a mutation in the calcium pathway. And you would think that I'm studying lung cancer, it has nothing to do with any of the other organs, but not very surprisingly, that mouse model was very obese. It had metabolic syndrome and of course diabetes, fatty liver, kidney disease, a lot of other diseases that we now think of as lifestyle diseases. So not only did the mouse had cancer, but it had everything else that I would have loved to study at that point. That got me thinking that, oh, I have been studying genetics all this while. I have been trying to come up with a way to treat these cancers, breast cancer and then lung cancer, the non-small cell lung cancer. But I did not focus on what is causing all of this. That got me thinking about what might be the common theme. And of course, I had always been following the gut microbiome and what it does and how it trains the immune system. So that was the point, that was the bulb on for me, that this is what I want to focus on. I want to prevent everything. And then when we talk about cancers, about what you rightly said about the gut microbiome controlling the genes, they control the chemical modifications on these genes. So whether these genes should be active, whether they should be inactive, all of this, majority of this is also determined not by just our own cells, but it is determined heavily by the gut microbiome. So they are actually chemically modifying our genome. If we know about it, it's a huge help. It's a big step forward in preventing so many cancers, in treating so many different cancers. So for example, the gut microbiome actually influences the histone deacetylases, the enzymes that modify all of these, genes. And that decides whether these cancer genes are turned on, turned off, or what is it that is happening. Then we started looking at the quality of the gut microbiome. Because if we think of the immune system, now I have told this story before, that when we think of anybody, we have trillions of cells. When our cells are replicating, there are going to be some errors. There are going to be some mistakes, and these mistakes lead to cancer cells in our body. These cancer cells are normally present, as you know very well, in everybody. But our immune system, if it is trained extremely well, it can detect those cancer cells and it kills them immediately. And this training happens in the gut. Majority of this training happens in the gut. So the gut microbiome is training our immune system. Now what happens? Now in the past 2 or 3 decades, the microbiome has changed so dramatically that majority of us have a very disturbed gut microbiome. It is called dysbiosis. You obviously know about it. But when we have a dysbiotic gut, when we don't have the right kind of training of the immune system, these cancer cells flourish. Nobody is able to kill them. The immune system doesn't know that it should kill them. And then the cancer starts growing. It is fueled by the sugary foods, the processed foods, and all of the unhealthy things. And we see all of this in the microbiome testing reports. We actually can visualize this, that this is the dysbiotic gut, this is the low diversity of the microbiome, these are the pathogens people have. That is why they have a huge risk of cancers. We see Helicobacter very commonly, we see E. coli very commonly. So
that's an amazing insight. But let me put it this way. All cancers behave differently.
yes,
And now when I look at animal models, we've actually found that some cancers cure themselves with simple microbiome manipulation.
yes,
Now that is massive. If you ask me, the word cancer typically is associated with a sense of death, right? People assume that once it's cancer, there's nothing that can be done. The truth is now cancer is becoming a chronic disease. Now, can you just shed some light on people who actually have been diagnosed with cancer? Can we do something about their gut microbiome to either treat them or to help them become more responsive to their treatment or to give them a normal life?
okay, so as I said, the immune system is responsible for detecting cancer cells. And when there are single cancer cells floating around in the body, it is very easy to detect them. It is very easy to get rid of them. But when that same cancer grows, when it becomes, big enough to be detected as cancer, when people are diagnosed with cancer, at that point also, it is possible to modulate the gut microbiome to figure out using gut microbiome testing as to what is the status of their gut microbiome, what is the status of their gut health. We can measure it and we can modulate it for that dysbiotic gut to become normal, so that the immune system is at least now trained. At least now it is trained. It activates the kind of cells, the natural killer cells or whatever, the T regulatory cells that are required to detect this cancer. And even at that stage, it is possible. So people who have this early stages of cancer, the stage 1 or whatever, it is still possible to detect and get rid of that cancer in many forms of cancer. Even if there are later stages and people are going through chemotherapy or immunotherapies. Now, how would immunotherapy even work if the immune system is not well trained? So modulating it, measuring gut health, adding the right kind of probiotics that they require that are missing in their body can actually help train the immune system to get rid of cancers or to augment the treatment that they are going through. So that is for people who are going for cancer treatment or who already have been diagnosed with cancer.
That's amazing. In fact, I'm aware of some studies where people used fecal microbiome transplant
Yes.
for people who had very aggressive cancer. They were not responding to chemotherapy. And surprisingly, once they had the fecal microbiome transplant, which is technically a very simple procedure, they not only responded, the actual thing is their cancer reverted. That sounds like magic. Are we looking at a very paradigm shift in the way we look at cancer?
Absolutely. So now that we know that the immune system plays such an important role, the gut microbiome again heavily plays a role in modulating the immune response. So when we think about responders and non-responders, what is happening here? For the same kind of cancer, when given the same kind of treatment like chemotherapy, there's a set of people who respond extremely well to that chemotherapy. There's another set that do not respond. And for many years we just didn't know why they did not respond. It turns out that these non-responders actually have a gut microbiome that is very poor. It does not support, it does not metabolize the chemotherapy that is being given to these patients. But the responders, that's a completely different story. They are metabolizing the medication, they are using those medications, and that's why they are responding to the chemotherapy. So when scientists have tried this fecal microbiome transplant, which is transferring the content of the guts from responders to non-responders, their intestines are changed, their microbiome changes, even if it is temporary. That itself helps the immune system to train itself, and that helps them respond much better to chemotherapy.
Rashmi, you are absolutely touching a very fundamental point, and this I think everyone in the world should really be aware of. Are we now trying to say that anyone who's diagnosed with a cancer should ideally have his fecal microbiome testing right at the outset, and then modify or keep a very close eye on it, because manipulating that might actually be the answer rather than going for very aggressive therapies. Is that the way you look at it?
The way I look at it is absolutely people who are diagnosed with cancer know that they are going to go for some kind of treatment, be it radiation, chemotherapy, or immunotherapy, or any other kind of treatment. Any of these treatments further damages the microbiome. So it is always a very good idea for people who are diagnosed with cancer to immediately do a fecal microbiome test, which is the comprehensive gut microbiome test. It is just simple stool test where the microbes are sequenced, where we know exactly what they have, whether they have pathogens that are going to make cancers worse, whether they have probiotics that are missing that need to be added to their gut so that they have a much better prognosis, they have much better outcomes of their treatment. So absolutely, I would highly recommend people who are diagnosed, or even before that, people who know that they have a risk of cancer, who have a history of cancer.
Now, I've got two very interesting follow-up questions now.
Yes.
One is, we all do annual routine health checks.
Yes.
And the one thing we don't do is a fecal microbiome test. In fact, I do a lot of what I call as surrogate markers.
Yes.
Height, weight, everything. Today, I don't have something called an ideal microbiome. So is there any way in which we can have something called an ideal microbiome? And then I can check myself annually against it so I can work towards keeping it really healthy. That's my first question. My second question is even more interesting. There was a study when people actually took feces from relatively healthy individuals and transplanted in an obese individual. This was in mice, of course, not in humans. And the obese mice became very healthy. Can we apply some kind of thinking like this for cancer treatment? So answer them separately.
Yes. So for the first question, where you talked about the general the annual testing. So when we do the comprehensive gut microbiome testing, people's gut microbiome reports that we receive are compared to a set of standard healthy cohort. So we have that data already. We have that worldwide data from the World Microbiome, the Human Microbiome Sequencing Consortium. And we also have the Indian data, the Caucasian data. There are different data sets that are, that we compare it to. So we know what a healthy microbiome should look like. When we do fecal microbiome testing for anybody, it is compared to this healthy cohort. And we know exactly what probiotics are foundational, what are missing in a person, what pathogens this person is seeing, and whether those pathogens are in high enough numbers to create problems. If they are just there or they are in the top 10. So there are a lot of parameters.
So potentially you think we can avoid cancer if we go down this particular screening route?
Yes. So
It can be the way TB was avoided.
Yes. So there are so many different factors in the microbiome testing. Like it not only gives an idea as to whether there's imbalance or not, how diverse the microbiome is, whether it has any pathogens or not, what probiotics are missing, which ones are low in numbers. The very important thing is, most people that we talk to, they say that, oh, I follow a very healthy lifestyle. I eat a very healthy diet. And when we see their microbiome report, it is so poor that healthy is not a blanket thing that you say this thing is healthy and then everybody starts following it. It is specific for any individual because everybody is unique. What is healthy for me might not be healthy for you. And obviously when people have symptoms, when they are saying that, oh, I have constipation, I have bloating, I have something else, when you have symptoms, whatever you are doing is not healthy, then why do you have the symptoms? So in that report, we get an idea about their disease risk, whether they are going to have leaky gut based on their microbiome, whether they are prone to arthritis, whether they are prone to diabetes, just based on their gut microbiome. There's another very important parameter, which is short chain fatty acids. It also gives an idea about whether the short chain fatty acids are in ideal levels or not. We know extremely well from many publications that when people do not have enough short chain fatty acids like butyrate, acetate, and propionate being made, it increases their risk of all kinds of cancers because they are highly anti-inflammatory. And we have not seen a single report where people have normal short chain fatty acid levels.
Again, makes a lot of sense. But if that is so important, how do you propose we get this concept of cancer management through gut microbiome manipulation to the mainstream? Because the vast majority of my own colleagues don't even talk about human gut microbiome. We still are doing the chemotherapy, the radiotherapy, the immunotherapy, the expensive medicines. But if it is us, even if it's an adjunct, I think we should start talking a lot louder about human microbiome manipulation. Can you shed your thoughts about this? Because cancer is so common and it's one of the most expensive drains on our health resources.
Yes, absolutely. So we did a nationwide survey. Now, whenever people come for webinars, we ask them to enumerate, to write about what health conditions they have. And you might think that, oh, they have just written bloating, they have written constipation, they have written something at the most diabetes or whatever. Whichever health condition they have, it is linked to a poor gut microbiome. When they have a poor gut microbiome, that automatically means that their cancer cells are not going to be detected because their immune system is poor. It automatically means that they are at high risk of cancers. That itself should tell people that this is the reason why we have such a huge rise in cancer globally. Because if they have any symptoms which indicates they have a poor microbiome, they are at a very high risk of any kind of cancer.
In fact, this is true. We are noticing almost an epidemic of cancer once we started introducing processed food in the
Yes,
food chain.
yes,
Because if I only look at about the data from about, let's say, 150 years ago, the numbers were manageable, but then we assumed that we weren't living long enough to see cancer.
yes.
So there could be a bias there. But going forward, I'm absolutely fascinated that cancer could just be something as simple as toxic effect of the gut microbiome. What do you think is the role of antibiotics that we so commonly consume? Are they somehow also pushing cancer?
Absolutely. That's an amazing question. So antibiotics are directly pushing cancers because 98 to 99% of our gut microbiome is made of bacteria. When a person takes antibiotics, it might be specific for, gram positive, gram negative, or a subset of bacteria. But
Really interesting.
imagine,
Yeah, yeah. Let's have a question. Yeah.
Really interesting conversation.
hello. Yes. Thank you so much for joining. What is your question?
We can't hear you.
Hello. Do you have a question? Sorry, we can't hear you. All right. So when we can hear, I'll address
Yeah.
that question, or one of us will do that.
Sure.
But so I was saying that when we know that the antibiotics are killing a subset of the microbiome, we are automatically reducing that kind of training of our immune system, the functions that it's not just the immune system training. We are also not getting the vitamins that are made by the microbiome. We are not getting the minerals that are absorbed by the microbiome. We are not getting the digestion of fiber that is done only by the microbiome. So it automatically reduces the amount of short chain fatty acids, the neurotransmitters, and there are so many cascading effects.
Rashmi, let me be the devil here. Antibiotics have saved countless lives.
Yes, absolutely.
And how would you then say, see, I have to use antibiotics? I don't think there's any
Yes.
alternative or I would stop using antibiotics. How would you mitigate the risk of dysbiosis? Would you suggest that we use it only for limited times, or we combine it with probiotics, or we use very, very selective antibiotics? How do we go about this?
Yes, so there are many different things that can be done. In some cases, of course, antibiotics are the only option. But we have to be very judicious. I'm sure you are being extremely judicious. But people take antibiotics on their own because in many countries they are available over the counter. So, and antibiotics are not just from prescription from doctors. They are also coming from the meat, dairy, or a lot of food products because the animals are given antibiotics to increase their weight. How does their weight increase? By creating dysbiosis in those animals. So the antibiotics are not just coming from prescriptions. They are coming from a lot of other things. So if we can control where antibiotics come from and limit the use of antibiotics even by doctors, that can be of huge help. And after antibiotics, we have to replenish the gut with fermented foods, with probiotics.
So, Rashmi, again, let me just be a common person who has no control over the food chain.
Yes,
I can't control what's coming through the milk or the meat or
yes,
any food that I consume. But obviously, we would all want to have good health. Now, are you suggesting that we just do regular screening of our gut microbiome and adjust our diet according to what is required? Or are you suggesting something else?
So the antibiotics, if they are coming from the food, are majorly coming from the meat, fish, dairy, not fish. I mean, whatever is the poultry, because they are actively injected with antibiotics. So there is some, at least we can limit the consumption of that if we cannot control where it is coming from. The other thing we can do is, of course, when we do microbiome testing, we know exactly where we stand in terms of gut health. And we can adjust it by controlling the diet. There are dietary recommendations given in it so that we can improve our gut health. There are also probiotic recommendations based on that testing. So it is a very good idea to do that at least, annually, to see where we are in terms of our gut health. And this is going to help immensely in preventing so many different forms of cancers.
Okay, one more question. Since gut microbiome is such an important thing, do you think a screening early or when you are young, when you almost have no diseases, is really of value? Or at what age should we start screening?
So we actually start screening at the age of 6. Of course, we don't ask people to start their whatever. But what we have realized, and I remember you saying it, that you are seeing patients with ulcerative colitis coming to your clinic as young as 8 years old, who do not have most probably enough diversity in their gut. This is the reason why they are suffering, and they're coming from homes that are too clean. So if we have people like this, if we have children suffering from this, that would be a very good time to do the gut microbiome testing. But at least young adults should definitely do it.
Again, a very fascinating thing. We moved away from bugs, saying that all bugs are dangerous after Leeuwenhoek got his microscope.
Yes.
And we started killing them. Today we are saying that no, they are not all bad. We have to keep some of them intact.
Yes.
The question here is, do we understand everything about the human microbiome, or is still a very, very evolving area?
It is an evolving field. I'm not saying we understand everything about it, but I can tell you that we understand enough about it to take action. It's not that we don't know at all, because when we see the gut microbiome report, now there was a very interesting paper somebody, Vishalji actually forwarded on our group, that this study that was done recently in the United States actually showed that 3/4 of the babies that are born in the US right now, now are lacking in one of the most foundational bacterium, Bifidobacterium. That is the one that can digest mother's milk. That is the one that sets the tone for the rest of the life to have good gut health. And it is very, very shocking to see that it is completely missing in 3/4 of the babies that are born in the United States. We are at such a dire situation.
Rashmi, that is amazing information. As I said, I look at ulcerative colitis, and the one thing that's really fascinated me is we are now saying the best treatment for unresponsive IBD is FMT,
Yes.
which is a complete loop around,
Yes.
right? And I have seen a few patients. I'm quite comfortable to say, yes, this is definitely an area of promise. Is there anything at the end you would like to kind of propose as a message, especially for people who are either diagnosed with cancer or have been diagnosed with cancer in the past?
Yes, many people have a family history of cancers, and I would like to tell them that it's not it's not a sentence that if there is something even genetic, it's not mandatory for everybody to have them. The chemical modifications like the histone deacetylases that I said, the epigenetics, actually are regulated by the gut microbiome. Even for people who are diagnosed with cancer, their treatment outcomes can be so much better if they get gut microbiome testing done. For people who have completed their treatment and do not want to relapse, absolutely must do gut microbiome testing, because of so many medications, radiation, and whatever treatment they have taken, the gut microbiome is going to be damaged. So in order to have a much better recovery, much better quality of life, and to prevent recurrence of cancers, it is highly recommended that they do gut microbiome testing so that their immune system is doing that surveillance properly. It is able to catch those cancer cells that are floating around and prevent relapse. So that is something that is absolutely a must.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a wonderful session. Monse, if you actually have a question, we'll be very keen to take it right now. I think there's some audio issue.
Yes, we can't
But
hear actually.
yeah, I think I'm very fascinated. And as I said, we'd probably take a specific cancer area to discuss this further. Probably start with colorectal, which is an area I'm very, very comfortable with.
Yes,
But thank you, Rashmi. I really enjoyed the session.
yes. Thank you so much, Abhay. It was wonderful.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.